It's a widely accepted belief in this country that the press suffers from a liberal or even leftist bias. Television pundits, radio talk show hosts, and political leaders, including presidents of both political parties, have helped propagate this belief. In contrast, progressive critics who maintain that the corporate-owned press exercises a conservative grip on news and commentary are given almost no exposure in the supposedly liberal or left media. Consider the many talk show hosts, of whom Rush Limbaugh is only the best known, who rail against the pinko press on hundreds of local television stations and thousands of radio stations owned by wealthy conservatives and underwritten by big business firms. These people occupy the media to complain about how they're shut out of the media. They complain about how conservatives supposedly can't get a word in the liberal-dominated media. Rush Limbaugh has an hour a day on network television, an hour a day on cable, and a radio show that's syndicated by over 600 stations. What a way to be shut out. Then there's the National Empowerment Television, NET, or NET, a cable network available in all 50 states, offering round-the-clock conservative political commentary. In the words of its founder, Paul Weyrich, NET is dedicated to countering, quote, unacceptable notions about gender norming, racial quotas, global warming, and gays in the military. The truth is, there is no free and independent press in the United States. The notion of a free market of ideas is as mythical as the notion of a free market of goods. Both of these ideas conjure up an image of a marketplace in which many small producers sell their wares on a more or less equal footing. In fact, whether it's commodities or it's commentary, to reach a mass market of millions of people, you need huge sums of money to buy exposure and distribution. Those without the big bucks end up with a decidedly smaller clientele, assuming they're able to survive at all. Who owns the big media? The press lords who come to mind in the newspaper business are Hearst, Luce, Murdoch, Sulzberger, Annenberg, rich conservatives who regularly leave their ideological imprint on both news and editorial content. The boards of directors of newspaper corporations and major TV networks are populated by representatives from Ford, General Motors, General Electric, General Dynamics, Alcoa, Coca-Cola, Philip Morris, ITT, IBM, and dozens of other corporations, in a system of interlocking directorates that resembled the boards of any other big corporation. Among the major stockholders of the three largest networks are Chase Manhattan, J.P. Morgan, and Citibank. NBC is owned outright by General Electric. General Electric is one of the more politically active and more conservative corporations. Another political and conservative corporation is Disney, and Disney owns ABC. Fox Network is owned by arch-conservative Rupert Murdoch. The prime stockholder of this country's most far-reaching wire service, Associated Press, is Merrill Lynch, a Wall Street brokerage firm. Not surprisingly, this pattern of ownership affects how news and commentary are manufactured. Virtually all chief executives of mainstream news organizations are drawn from a narrow, high-income segment of the population and tilt decidedly to the right in their political preferences. Media mogul Rupert Murdoch was once asked in an interview, quote, "You're considered to be politically conservative. To what extent do you influence the editorial posture of your newspapers?" Murdoch responded with refreshing candor, quote, "Considerably. My editors have input, but I make the final decisions." One of the first things Disney did when it took over ABC was cancel critic Jim Hightower's radio spots on over 200 ABC outlets. Disney didn't like his populist views. Corporate advertisers exercise an additional conservative influence on the media. They cancel accounts not only when stories reflect poorly on their product, but as is more often the case, when they perceive what they consider to be liberal tendencies creeping into the news reports or TV dramas. As might be expected, the concerns of labor are regularly downplayed. A study was done of all the reports dealing with workers' issues carried by ABC, CBS, and NBC Evening News during an entire year, including child care and minimum wage. These are all the issues defined as workers' issues. It came to about 2% of the total coverage. No wonder another survey found that only 6% of business leaders thought the media treatment accorded them was poor, while 66% said it was good or excellent. So business leaders aren't complaining about a liberal or left media. Religious media manifests the same gross imbalance of right over left. The fundamentalist media featuring homophobic, sexist, reactionary televangelists like Pat Robertson comprise a $2 billion a year industry, controlling about 10% of all radio outlets and 14% of the nation's television stations. In contrast, the Christian left lacks the financial backing needed to gain any appreciable media exposure. A favorite conservative hallucination is that the public broadcasting system is a leftist stronghold. In fact, more than 70% of PBS's primetime shows are funded mostly by 4 giant oil companies, earning it the nickname of Petroleum Broadcasting System. PBS's public affairs programs are underwritten by General Electric, PepsiCo, Paine-Webber, and the like. One media watchdog group found that corporate representatives constitute 44% of program sources about the economy, while labor representatives are virtually shut out. Guests on NPR and PBS generally are as ideologically conservative as any found on commercial networks. Most PBS documentaries are politically nondescript or centrist. Progressive works rarely see the light of day. Documentaries like Deadly Deception, a critique of General Electric and the nuclear arms industry, and Panama Deception, a critique of the Bush administration's invasion of Panama, both of which won Academy Awards, were turned down by almost all PBS and commercial stations. Most news reports that deal with U.S. involvement around the world, be it Central America, Haiti, Somalia, Bosnia, or wherever, give us a view of the world that comes directly from the U.S. State Department or the Pentagon. Critics of U.S. policy who say that the nation's economic and military power supports tyranny rather than democracy, supports the rich corporate investors instead of the interests of ordinary people, supports the arms dealers rather than the taxpayers. Such critics are offered no exposure to speak of in the mainstream media. Invited guests on most political talk shows are overwhelmingly government officials or corporate executives, not public interest advocates. It's not a left media or even a liberal media. It's a media in the service of the rich and powerful few. This is Michael Parenti for People's Radio.